Thank you all for being here. Welcome. My name is Brady Collins. As some of you know, I'm a faculty fellow with the California Center for Ethics and Policy here at Cal Poly Pomona, and I'm very excited to be hosting or facilitating this panel discussion and episode of our CCEP podcast, which is supported by the California Center for Ethics and Policy, the Digital Humanities Consortium, and the Special Projects for Improving the Classroom Experience Award. Today's panel is the final in a series that is examining the role of unions, advocates, and other economic justice groups in ongoing political and organizing fights that will shape the future of work in the Los Angeles region. And I have here with us three fantastic panelists who I will briefly introduce before we dive in. So first up, we've got Oscar U. Zarate, who is the Director of External Affairs at the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles, or CHIRLA. Oscar has a background in community organizing and advocacy with a focus on various social justice issues. He has coordinated advocacy campaigns aimed at achieving housing and mobility justice, while also developing leadership and community outreach programs to engage individuals in political and civic matters. Welcome, Oscar. Also have Flor Rodriguez. Flor is a workers' rights advocate who brings over 12 years of experience in coalition building, organizing, and leadership development. Flor joined CLEAN as a community organizer in 2012, but quickly took over as leader. As the executive director for CLEAN, Flor has led its transformation from a community campaign into the Clean Car Wash Worker Center. Welcome, Flor. And then lastly, we've got Cassidy Bennett. Cassidy is a staff attorney at Public Counsel in the Community Development Project, where she works with sidewalk vendors, small businesses, community organizers, cooperatives, and tenants on individual matters, policy changes, and broader impact litigation. Cassidy has also represented clients in bond matters before immigration court and supported small businesses and nonprofits in understanding their rights in immigration enforcement. Welcome, Cassidy. So, again, thank you all for being here. The topic of today's panel is ICE raids in Los Angeles and their impact on workers. So we're going to kick it off with you, Flor. As I mentioned at the top, you are the director of an organization called Clean Car Wash Worker Center. Can you first tell us what is Clean Car Wash? What is the history of this organization, and what is the work that you all do there?
Hi, everyone. Flor Melendres here. Happy to meet everyone here and to be part of this amazing panel with my colleagues Cassidy and Oscar as well. I want to start by sharing that Clean Car Wash started as a campaign. Many of you guys, if you search us up, you will find it as like back in the days, I want to say back in 2007. It started as the Clean Car Wash campaign, and it was to really highlight what was happening in the car wash industry. And the car wash industry was very known to be a tips only industry. So no wages, no rest and meal breaks, no, all the violations you could think of within an industry, they were happening at a car wash. And so to highlight that and to start a campaign to uplift what needed to happen in the industry to improve the industry, there was a campaign created by many local organizations, workers' rights organizations, religious leaders, as well as legal organizations to really walk with the workers on trainings on what minimum wage was, what classification was, misclassification was, right? To really understand what was happening in their industry and where they can head with the industry. We quickly realized that approaching the industry from an angle of only talking about what's happening in the workplace was impossible when workers who are suffering from wage theft are also suffering from other things like housing insecurity, income immobility, right? Like it's just it piles up. So we really wanted to have a holistic approach, and so therefore we turned our campaign into a worker center that can really then focus on organizing of the industry and on leadership development of the industry. We started doing that by really listening with grassroots organizing about what is it that the workers really needed for the industry. And besides addressing wage theft, they also wanted to address the health risks that they face with the direct exposure to the sun and the harsh chemicals that are used on a daily basis. And so, after that, they also wanted to talk a little bit more about what would it look like to have the industry be different. And so that's where a lot of the organizing happened. And what we have now is a worker center that responds to those needs with the focus on organizing and leadership development at its roots. We have grown from a membership of up to 2,000 car wash workers who are members. And just to give us an idea of LA County, a lot of our work is mainly in LA County, but in LA, we have over 10,000 car wash workers and over 500 car washes. I like to use the expression of like, if you take a drive past 2 blocks, 3 blocks, you're going to run into a liquor store and you're going to run into a car wash. That's very real for LA. And so, just to give you an example of why it was such an urgent thing to change and to organize the car wash industry. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And like you said, car wash workers have for, decades faced overlapping vulnerabilities, right? From being in low wage industries, from being facing, economic insecurity, and because many of them have been immigrants themselves, right? There's always been that vulnerability of their immigration status, right? It's not as if ICE was created this year, right? It's been around, and this has been a problem um, for immigrant workers in LA for a long time. That said, how has the work of Clean Car Wash shifted under the Trump administration's more recent aggressive use of immigration enforcement? How have things really changed, in the past few months?
They've changed a lot. I don't know how much folks on the call here know, but the car wash industry was very targeted during the raids. Having over almost like I don't want to get the numbers wrong, but over 100 car washes being raided, by immigration enforcement and in a very aggressive way, where, workers describe it as it almost looked like a kidnapping scene every time. And so, the way that our work has shifted, I can tell you we've always addressed workplace issues, right? And focusing on what are your rights at the workplace, what can you do about them? How do we connect you with other stuff in terms of like housing and security and stuff? It's always been like, let's connect you to this org, let's do a one referral. But it's always been the focus in organizing for the car wash in the job site organizing, right? And this time around, it really was to a surprise on how the rates are happening so consistently in car washes and how many violations exist during those raids, right? That workers obviously became very fearful,
Hmm.
not only based on status, but on safety. We have gotten workers who resulted in the hospital instead of in a detention center, and that's because of the aggressiveness of the raids. And so our work, as you can imagine, had to shift a lot because one thing is that workers want to talk to their boss about the conditions and collectively do so with support of community to create changes. That seems scary, but even so now more, knowing everything that is in our political climate, and also the narrative that some employers might use if anybody's willing to even step up. And so obviously our focus had to shift to really understanding what safety meant at the workplace, right? What are some private, non-private areas within the car wash? What are some options that they had in terms of like who comes in and comes out of the car washes? Car washes are designated by structure already to have clients come in and come out as fast as possible, right? Like that is the whole structure of a car wash. And I think that was one of the targets for this industry of like, being able to walk in, walk out. There's no clear boundaries of what is private, non-private space within these car washes. So that played a big role. So we took it really fast in terms of like making sure we're approaching every car wash so that they understood and they can define what was private or not private areas in the car wash, where workers can be for their safety because of the aggression of these raids, right? And also, what is the role of employers, right, to maintain their workforce, because obviously they're losing their workforce to these raids. And so it shifted in that way, and also in connecting to community, right? And this is when we started working closer with CHIRLA and other rapid responder groups, because obviously we don't have enough eyes and ears on the ground to know everything that's happening, because it was happening all over. It wasn't just LA, it's all over. And so how do we make sure we're connecting to those who are closest to those car washes? So relying on volunteers, creating committees, making sure that we're addressing some of those needs and training workers as much as possible, and employers. That's what really created that shift, not only during this administration, of course, during this administration, but it didn't only start now. It started also back in 2016 in the first round of this administration, right? Know your rights trainings are not new to us. And the force in which the detentions are happening, that's what became more aggressive this year, right? So that it has been a overall big shift on how it has happened, and why we think workers have in particular industry were considered that much of a target.
Yeah, yeah, and we're definitely going to talk about the rapid response that CHIRLA has been a part of. We're going to get there. But yeah, I mean, so it strikes me that what you're describing with the clean car wash, or with the car wash industry rather, just like kind of the day laborers at outside Home Depot, which was also a common site for these raids. That there's something about, the fact that this workforce is outside and the boundaries between kind of public and private space are not clear, that allows for these kinds of aggressive tactics to be more easily kind of wielded against them, right? And so you mentioned the Know Your Rights trainings. I wanna turn over to Cassidy and talk a little bit about what those Know Your Rights trainings have looked like. I know you've been doing them at Public Counsel for workers, for small business owners, and wanted to ask, what kinds of industries, what kinds of workforces, um, is ICE targeting? What is it about them that makes them particularly vulnerable from that kind of legal perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Brady. And I think Flor started like with a really good overview of it too. I think a lot of it is the vulnerability of workers who are outside, but then also talking to and training small businesses or nonprofits who your whole goal is to be open to the public and to allow your space to be utilized, um, to be available to the community for walk-ins. And I know that's been an issue. Like a lot of them put in place really amazing systems like food pickups or providing resources for the community during COVID. That might have been the first time for them. And then they might have brought it back or expanded it again during the fires last year. And then to move into having to do a very different kind of support for their communities, because it's hard to give know your rights information when you're offering something in such a public space. And a lot of what we're able to advise on, at least their lawful right is to keep people out of private spaces. And so when you have a public space that anyone can walk in, it's much easier for ICE agents to target because they may make assumptions on what kind of person is going to that space, um, what they look like, maybe what language they're hearing them speak, um, and utilizing those assumptions again, yeah, to target those spaces that either already have a harder membrane to read as far as private versus public, or explicitly utilize outside open spaces, either for community resources or to do their jobs. And I know, at least with the small businesses and nonprofits we work with, they may have a space or have a way to kind of organize around or move things around, whereas with especially like day laborers and sidewalk vendors and car wash workers, they're more exposed, more um, visible, and then especially like sidewalk vendors can be very spread out and can be targeted and kidnapped without being seen by other people. So it's thinking about that too. Like, are they targeting spaces where I think at first they were doing more targeting of large spaces where they could gather many people at once. Uh, and then now they've almost moved sort of more to this, like, as quick as they can, grabbing people more individually, knowing that we have started to put in these really powerful resources like the Rapid Response Network.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people here listening have seen some of these videos on the news. We looked at some of them in class a couple weeks ago where, yeah, you see kind of vans pull up and people are grabbed and thrown in there. Pretty shocking kind of visual. Is that lawful behavior, what ICE is doing in those videos? Is that illegal? How do we understand that?
Yeah, I think they have put us in some pretty tricky situations as far as this area of lawful versus unlawful. And I know um, I've talked with all of you about this too on the panel, but this idea that even as we're doing Know Your Rights and talking about what is lawful or unlawful for a business to do, or how a business or nonprofit can stand up for themselves and for their um, employees, their community members, whoever's in their space. Uh, Space is not always going to follow that and often might not. And so it's still really wonderful to be prepared and understand that. But I think what is even more important is knowing the things like how to respond, how to contact your rapid response network and report these kind of things, because no, they should not be doing that. They should be showing up with a warrant, have a warrant for arrest, understand who someone is. They should not be doing these like targeted grabs that are based on um, assumptions and racism. So they are definitely acting in a gray area, doing
Hmm.
some unlawful things, doing some things that maybe some judges could determine is lawful, but is often not.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. The gray area and the kind of endless litigation that we've been seeing under the Trump administration, as they sort of act quickly and then kind of see how the courts will decide things later on. But given that, what are some simple but meaningful ways that workers and small business owners can better protect themselves, kind of within that context?
Yeah, and I'll say it, like, I know that Flor and the Clean Car Wash Worker Center does this too, is just like, and CHIRLA, of course, like prepping as individuals. Like, if any of a bit like a business should be helping their workers prepare. And if they have a family, they should be putting together a family plan on what might happen with their kids. We train, uh, we work a lot with childcare providers. And so we talk to them about working with their families. Like, if you have a family, if there are families that come to your childcare center, how can you talk to them about what might happen if they don't show up to pick up their kids one day? What should the childcare worker do to contact the right family members, or contact, who do you need to contact? what paperwork should be in place, all of that stuff should be prepared. And I know, like with the childcare workers, it can be really hard because that may mean talking to kids about this, but that needs to be done so that they have some prep, and there are ways to do that and resources on that as well to do it in a way that's best for them. But having that kind of stuff prepared and providing those resources, I think, is really important so that those individual members can get ready for whatever that means for them and their families. I think also, so providing resources and workshops to help them with that. I would say also providing time if anything happens. We talk about if there is some type of raid at your workplace, at your nonprofit, how can you show up for your workers as well? Like, can you give people time off? We talk some about, like, again, this has not been a huge thing because so much of the raids have been happening in a different way, but there's like I-9 audits that can happen where they come in and they say, oh, you're employing someone who shouldn't be employed. Like, how can you help that worker either figure out their paperwork, or can you give them severance? Can you write them a strong recommendation letter? A lot of it, I think, is probably fairly individual, but I would say it based a ton just in like prep for the worst.
Yeah, worst case scenario planning, it sounds like. Um, so thank you. I want to get to you, Oscar, because we've been hearing about this rapid response networks and how these things work. Before we get into that, though, I know you've also been doing, some research at CHIRLA to try to understand the scale and the impact of these raids in Los Angeles. Can you talk a little about some of the findings of that research that CHIRLA's done?
Yeah, absolutely, Brady. But before I get into that, I just want to thank you again for the invitation and for being on this very esteemed panel with expertas chingonas in the field. Um, I agree with Flor. Like the first day of the raids, I went to the Ambiance garment worker, garment factory on Santa Fe, and that's the day I knew this was a totally different operation. That's when David Huerta was slammed to the ground, violently arrested by what I would describe federal paratroopers, and I think that set the tone for what we saw throughout the entire summer. But, something that at the Rapid Response Network we say often it's actually this quote by an amazing Latinoamericano poet and leader, Pablo Neruda, who said that they may cut all the flowers, but they cannot stop the spring, right? So, and that phrase that is really the motto behind our trainings, behind our rapid responders, and behind the work that we do. But very quickly, in terms of scale at the LA Rapid Response Network, and again, the LA Rapid Response Network covers the entire county. It's not the only rapid response network. There's also community patrollers, which are a little different from responders. But yeah, the LA Rapid Response Network covers the entire county. We have a hotline for people to call in to report suspected ICE sighting, and we do our best to verify and confirm. But through that hotline and through our work, we've gotten over 14,000 calls to the hotline, and that's since July, right? We've received close to 3,000 reported sightings of immigration enforcement in neighborhoods. Our volunteers, our responders, have witnessed 477 arrests, documented them, connected with family members, and more than 1,200 families have reported the detention of their loved ones to CHIRLA. And in terms of the families we support, right, we've conducted 653 wellness intakes of the 1,200 families that have reached out to us. And some of the top lines, and maybe some of this might not surprise people, 41% of the folks detained are Mexican nationals. The second highest are Guatemalans at 20%. 35% of the folks who were detained were at work. 12% of them were on their way to work or leaving from work. 64% of them have not secured legal representation. And that really talks about just that we don't have enough capacity, right? As a legal rapid response network, there's not enough attorneys to go around. There's not enough folks that can represent everybody who has been kidnapped and detained. And out of the 653 we've done wellness intakes, 15% of them have already been deported. out of the country. And to get some of the sense of the impact that this creates on families, 60% of families that we did this intake with are facing food insecurity, housing insecurity, and close to 70% of them have dependents. So that's children or other folks that depend on that breadwinner. And again, a lot of the folks that they're taking are head of households, breadwinners. And as you can imagine, that has a very destabilizing effect on the whole family. Something interesting, 12.3% of folks who have been detained are small business owners, right? And close to 23% report medical needs. And that spans from diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, and mental health conditions. So hopefully that kind of paints a picture of one, the impact and the scale of the raids, but also the type of impact that it's having on our family, our community members.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up, some of those numbers about the scale, about the fact that it's head of households, that there's business owners involved as well, right? We've been looking at some reports in the class about kind of the economic impact of these raids, right? And how much it is negatively impacting the local economy here in Los Angeles, right? Where some of the industries where these workers are employed are the backbone of our economy here, right? And so it's having a enormous effect on jobs, on economic activity in our communities. I think I saw a LA Times article about the fact that after the summer of raids, there was just nobody out eating at restaurants anywhere in Los Angeles for weeks, right? Out of fear. And
And
so
I feel like, oh, if
go
I could
ahead.
add really quickly, Brady, I think that's intentional. They want to create an environment of fear, an environment of high stress and anxiety, because they want for our people to not feel comfortable in the very communities and the very cities that they live, so that they can ultimately self-deport. And from my opinion, that is their goal, right? To make it uncomfortable and for them to force them to leave the communities they've known for their entire lives. Something else I'll add to your point too is that there's this narrative, again, they want to push the narrative that it's all criminals and it's all folks who are mooching from the system and not providing value to our society and therefore deserve to be treated the way they are. That's just completely not true. We just said small business owners, right? But on top of that, many of these folks, and not that this like, it proves that they're good people, but they also pay taxes, right? Billions of dollars into the California economy, into the national economy. Now, we're not saying that because you pay taxes, you now deserve dignity. Everyone deserves dignity, but I think it goes against the narrative that I think the federal government wants us to believe.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so y'all have been putting together this rapid response network to better protect immigrant communities during this time. So tell us a little bit more, how this thing works, and what it looks like. I know you said people can call in. There are, I forget the name for the kind of boots on the ground that you have kind of going out there and talking to folks after a raid has happened. But yeah, what does this look like on the ground when you're building something like this at this scale?
Absolutely. So the LA Rapid Response Network has existed through CHIRLA since the Bush administration. So we've been doing raid rapid response since George W. Bush in the 2000s. So it has a long history. I've only been involved since the raid started in the summer. So I'm standing on the shoulders of many great immigrant leaders and folks that have cited on justice who have been doing this work for years. And now the way the rapid response network looks like now is that we have over 1,500 volunteers trained. We have trainings in order to be in the rapid response network as a rapid responder. You have to be trained through our methodology and the culture that we want to build with rapid responders. And thankfully, we've gotten, like I said, over 1,500 volunteers. We also have over 60 partner organizations. So these are legal service providers who are part of our legal rapid response network, but also labor unions, faith groups, grassroots groups that have committed to devoting staff time to help us run the rapid response network. So just great gratitude and recognition of the work that those partners and those volunteers do, because it's not just CHIRLA, it's all these people coming together to do this work collectively. Apart from that, the way it works is that we do have a hotline, our CHIRLA hotline, the rapid response hotline, that takes in both reporting, but also families can call it if they have a family member who's detained and they want to ask for assistance. Our partner organization, MDEF, also has their own legal rapid response hotline, and that's solely for folks who want to report detained loved ones. So once we get our reporting, we actually have a pretty, which is also staffed by CHIRLA staff, a dispatch center where our callers take in the report. They do some, we have a system of filtering out maybe false reporting. Maybe this is a great note that our county attorney, I forget his name, the attorney of the federal attorney for this area, on Twitter tweets out to go and do false reportings on our hotline, and we've gotten a lot of false reporting ever since he made that tweet, calling for people to stock up our hotline. So we have a filter system. We see what reporting feels valid, and then once we do that, we send it out into our signal groups where all of our responders are there. And then once it's reported in the group, one of our responders, usually whoever's the closest, goes in response, and then from there, they do their information gathering. Again, we don't train we don't interfere with federal operations. Our goal really is to document and to connect to the families, most importantly, because again, this is having your family member detained by ICE is probably the worst. It's probably some families' worst nightmare. It's literally the worst thing, the most horrible thing that could ever happen to them. And it's really our responders who are there and who can are almost like, first responders, where they go in and are trying to provide resources, support, and comfort to a family that has gone through one of the most horrible experiences one can imagine. And that's really our goal, to get information, document for litigation and for record keeping, and then connect families to the resources, both legal and mutual aid resources, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, first responders, I think, is the right way to describe them, right? Responding to a crisis like that on the ground as first responders do. Um, so in addition into the Rapid Response Network at CHIRLA, I also wanted to ask a little bit about kind of your policy advocacy that y'all have been doing. I know that CHIRLA is, at the forefront of engaging California's elected officials on this issue. I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about what that's looked like and, what excites you about some of that work, if anything.
No, great question, Brady. Right now, the two main things that we're really working with our California caucus, both, and I'm speaking specifically about our members of Congress, both senators and Congress members for California, is holding the line for right now. There's a big fight over DHS funding. Surprisingly and encouragingly, they have held the line. The California caucus has held the line, and the entire Democratic caucus has held the line. And as of now, there has been no more money, not one single cent given to DHS and to operate their, in my opinion, their terror machine and their deportation machine. And that's what we've been pushing with our partners all over California. We have a California Table for Immigration Reform that would normally be working to push immigration reform federally from a California perspective, but now we've had to. Not that we've had to, but we gladly shifted into making sure that no more money goes into DHS. Other than that, we've been pushing for more protections at the state level. We actually have a bill with Senator Sasha Perez at AB 1150 or SB 1150. Sorry, I'm not a California advocate, so sometimes I get the letters mixed up. But it's an important bill just to make sure we have higher accountability for one, ICE agents, but two, any local police that chooses to collude or work with or work in tandem with federal officers that are discriminating and breaking the law. So that's the purpose of SB 1105, and we're hopeful that's going to pass, and it's one step in ensuring a safer California.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, there's some things to be excited about there. Glad to hear that. So now I want to open it up to our audience, folks here in attendance. If you have questions for any of our panelists, please type them in the chat, raise your hand, and we will field some questions from the group. Brianne, please.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm wondering if you can share models of like institutional partnerships. So I'm thinking about I want to say last semester there was a bunch of raids that happened in our backyard, like Pomona, Montclair, Upland, Chino, all on the same day. And the next day we had a university event where the provost spoke and lots of campus leaders spoke, and there was no mention of what had happened in our community the day before. And I was really disappointed that we didn't have more like acknowledgement and recognition of what the community was going through and witnessing. And so are there any partners out there that are really leading the way in terms of like how to align our priorities with the communities we serve?
I can get us started. I would point you to the Pomona Economic Opportunity Center or the Pomona Day Labor Center. They've been doing incredible work there around rapid response and the issues that federal rates bring into a community. There's also the Warehouse Worker Center. We've worked with them on some worker immigration issues, and I find them to be incredible partners. And also the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice does incredible work in the Inland Empire. We also have a CHIRLA office. As a CHIRLA staffer, I feel like I have to say that we also have an office in the Inland Empire, but that's more in San Bernardino, which might be a little bit farther away from Pomona. But those are some people that come at the top of my mind.
Those are great examples, Oscar. I love all those groups. I would also just add like calling that out when you see it, when possible, and with others as much as you can as well. I think it's so important when higher ups know,
Yeah.
like
And
that's
I just
not
want to jump
okay.
in and clarify that I actually did. I spoke to the provost that day, and she
Yeah,
was great and advocate. I think their program was already running. I guess what
yeah,
I'm trying to get at is not necessarily like our leadership, but the disconnect between um or how to better coordinate, right? Those sorts of efforts. Like how do we jump in those sort of emergent situations? So yeah, I did. She was on board, and she was grateful that I brought it up to her and to our AVP of Student Success.
no
Um,
good.
but yeah, there are other institutions again who are just sort of like the school district. The same period had sent out an email to all the families, right, letting them know that it had happened, and so that to me was a model.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. Because I think some of it is just like that culture shift, and like they need to know that people are looking for, and we can't just like continue business as usual.
I agree. There's no business as usual, and it usually takes everyone to stand up and say something, anyone, and everyone should. And so sometimes you have to be that person to have to call it out. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, thank you, Brianne. Any others, questions for our panelists?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Please, Zadie, go ahead.
So I work for a nonprofit. I work with youth in LA and Ventura County. And I've experienced a lot of them coming to me about their concerns and their fears and feeling like they don't have control. They can't make a change in their own lives and communities. And so I guess I've been in a situation where I'm almost at a loss, like of how to respond appropriately. So I guess from your perspective, what are the most important things or the things that I should avoid doing when kids are, youth anywhere from like 5 years old to 18 years old are coming to me with like these fears or just telling me their experience or asking for help?
Maybe I can get us started, but that's a great question. I think it is really hard, especially for children, right? If if as parents we are in fear, we could only imagine how our children are. And so I would really invite them to create a plan with their families, right? Of like what happens if you don't come home, and we need to have that conversation, as tough as that is, because that is one of my fears, right? And I think partnering up with organizations that are doing some of that emergency family responding, emergency planning. I can tell you, for us, the workers were having a very difficult time having these conversations at home. Like, we could have the trainings in the office, like in our space, in our training space. And when they would take all this information, it was overwhelming. They were taking it home and not discussing it. So what we ended up doing was a family day where they could come in, they could bring their family, and then we broke into groups so that they can have these conversations with a guided, I guess, a guided conversation with someone. And then right there and then connect them to the legal group that can then, I actually like, make these documents, the legal documents that would be used, right? And that was helpful, like walking with them through that process, made a big shift and change in the children and in the workers themselves. So, we work with Bethsedic Legal Services, to create some of these documents, and also like some of the trainings. They could be done virtually, but also creating a safe space where families can come and gather and do that in person. It's always a plus. Yeah.
Yeah, great questions, Adi, and thank you, Flor. We have, I don't have the full name, but Jay, please.
Sorry, it doesn't allow me to put my first name. It's Jan. So this is kind of like a follow-up to Brianne's question. I'm on the Pomona campus too, but I guess it could be any campus. Are things set up, because we have a lot of undocumented students on our campuses, and I've heard of these students being really afraid when they're on campus, and what should happen if, something happens to them. Curricularly, we require, I'm in the education department, so one of the things is they have to do fingerprinting in order to go into the schools. And some of them are afraid to even do that because they might get targeted. And so I guess I want to know if there are any support systems for students on campus who are afraid.
That's a hard one. I feel like on some level I should be trying to answer that as well. I wish I had a good answer, but go ahead, Flor.
Yeah, not that I have an answer, Brady, but because we mainly work with car wash workers, and a lot of their children are smaller, or of a younger age. But one of the things that I can say, just working with interns, or like students, or speaking at classes for different students, I have heard the same, right? Where the students, where I'm in a panel, and the students from a class would say, like, these are my fears, and I don't know how to handle that, or this is what I'm fearful to go back home if they're a transfer student, or if they're, a out-of-state student. I would say it's important. We work with many organizations, and even like Public Counsel or others, right? Like, that are here. We can there. I don't think that curriculum has been developed for that age, or that I know of, but it's important if it's something that we should be working on, right? I think it's something to be addressed to those groups that have put those legal packages or legal trainings together, for this group of students. That could be like one idea on how that conversation could get started. Creating a group of students that can share that, and then by hearing them, creating the curriculum that might be needed for some sort of training, or some support capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say, we were talking about this in our previous panel about the fact that so many of our students go to school at Cal Poly Pomona and are employed by Cal Poly Pomona. So it's both their university and their employer. And I think making sure that we can have these conversations openly, and at times intimately with students, and being as accommodating and flexible as possible. And I say that as wearing my professor hat as well, right? That professors should similarly be approaching their student body in that way, with that kind of openness and understanding, given the circumstances that so many of them face.
Yeah, I wonder too, I don't know, Oscar, if there's even a way to like think about numbers for this kind of question, but I know that more just based on what we've observed and seen, that especially in our network of support for sidewalk vendors, vendors who have participated in Know Your Rights or are just more involved in organizing or have connections just to other vendors or other support systems are like just not a huge number of them have actually been detained. So I do think there is hope and like that kind of organizing and connection to those rapid response networks and support like CHIRLA and like Clean is really helpful. And so just like it looks like there is an undocumented students services on campus, which is amazing. So I think like hopefully that can bring some hope of just like connections too. And I think maybe that goes some to of your question too, Zadie. I know it's different even for like younger youth, especially like really little, but they're that community building is really beautiful and really important and has done incredible work in protecting those communities.
Yeah, I like that idea about the rapid responders, and I was just wondering if faculty could be trained to be a rapid responder, just so that it might help the student, at least if, we can take some information and send it on and I don't know, but I've been struggling with this because I don't know what to do myself. So, but I really thank all of you for helping me think this through a little more. And I'm so sorry, I'm still driving, so that's why my camera is off, but thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll just say I love that idea, Jan, and I definitely want to connect you and any other faculty to Oscar and to CHIRLA and I agree we should get trained. That's definitely one thing we can do. Any other questions for our panelists? Okay. Well, then I would like to ask the final question, if I may, and I'll ask it to each of you. And maybe we can start with Flor. What is, given everything that we've talked about, what gives you concern about the future of immigrant and worker organizing, and what gives you hope?
Yeah, my concern is the uncertainty of things, right? There's so much up in the air that we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen if there's another wave of this. Just the uncertainty of not knowing. Also, the budget conversation, right? And how funds are spent with this administration and priorities, right? So that is definitely a concern. But what gives me hope is interested community, volunteers, our youth, our folks who probably had never gotten approached or got involved to organize in their community, who now see it as that this is what I need to do now because I can and I have that privilege. That gives me a lot of hope. Our community is coming together to respond and shift and change into what we need to protect our own communities. Like that gives me a lot of hope.
Cassidy, what about you? Same question.
Yeah, love your answer, Flor. I would say concern, yeah, uncertainty, especially LA specific. We have a lot of big events coming up, so that's been on a lot of our minds as far as how do we prepare for increased presence of enforcement of all kinds, especially as an excuse for more ICE. And again, while also making sure that communities get the benefits of us hosting these large events. So definitely concerned there. I would say hope is similar. Yeah, just like seeing how much community has showed up for each other in LA is incredible. Like I feel really, really thankful to see it. And I would say like public counsel alone, it's been really helpful. Like was mentioned, I've gotten to do some of these like immigration bond cases, and that's only because my colleagues who are experts in that are taking their time to train others of us who have not done that work before to take that on as well. And I'm just really thankful for all the really cool ways that we've come together throughout these. Like Oscar was talking about in-depths. That's how we like distribute all the legal work for immigration bond cases to make sure that we're reaching as many people as possible despite their efforts to overwhelm us. So really grateful for that. I also read a really great book recently that reminded me when you asked the student question that one of Clean Car Wash's founders, Carla, is mentioned in. So it's great for that too, but it's about undocumented students organizing. So would recommend that too for any students that might be interested.
I see you put in a chat. I'll just read it out loud. Dreaming of Home, How We Turn Fear into Pride, Power, and Real Change by Cristina Jimenez. Thank you for the recommendation. And Oscar, we'll end with you.
Thank you. Very hard to follow up those two great answers. I think I'll just echo them. I think the uncertainty for sure. We don't, this federal administration is very unpredictable, and I'd like to think that we got through the worst of it, but that's not guaranteed by any means. The other thing that concerns me is the midterms. I think there's a lot of assumption that's going to be a great win for us, but who knows, man? And especially California and the governor's race is something that definitely is on top of my mind. And then in terms of what gives me hope, MLK on the March on Washington said that there's that we have to act with the fierce urgency of now. And I think that's what's been happening here in LA and in Minneapolis and in all these different cities where ICE chose to deploy their violence, is that people finally, not finally, but I think more firmly grounding themselves in, again, this fierce urgency of now. And because of that, we've been able to do incredible things. I mean, Minneapolis, one day, general strike, amazing. All of our marches and all of our efforts here in LA with the Rapid Response Network, but also with May Day, which is coming up. Quick plug to May Day. MacArthur Park, 10 a.m. Join us. So yeah, I think that's what gives me hope that I think more and more people are jumping on this train of the fierce urgency of now.
Thank you. I love that. Great way to end it. I want to say again, thank you. I so appreciate the three of you, the work that you do. Thank you for the conversation today. Thank you for everyone that joined us to participate. I think, Jan, you and I have to get our entire departments trained in rapid response, so I'm going to commit both of us to that. But please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Cassidy and Flor. And I will see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.